pure Barclays. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what this means, I mean, it is a bit vague, but essentially, pure Barclays is referring to when the Premier League was sponsored by Barclays and known as the, Barclays Premier League, and the players back in the day, those days sort of like 2000s, the 2010s era of Premier League football, and it's a pure Barclays player is essentially a player who kind of wasn't really like a world-class, legendary player, not like some Thierry Henry or anything, but they're a sort of memorable player where you sort of look back in 20 years and, you're like, oh my god, I remember that guy scored that goal, or oh, I remember that season he had, oh my gosh, this guy's celebration, etc. And it sort of brings back memories, and for people, it brings back memories of, the Barclays Premier League. So that's at least my understanding of what pure Barclays sort of means. So, some examples of players who are, I guess, considered pure Barclays would be Rory Delap, Yakubu, Lualua, Leighton Baines, Richard Dunn, Aaron Lennon, Pape Cisse. You can have so many others, but those are just some examples. Now, what I'm going to do, I mean, I could create an actual pure Barclays team, but what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to create a pure Barclays 11 using current players, essentially predicting who, I guess, in 20, 30 years time people would consider pure EPL, I guess, when they look back in this sort of era of football we're in right now. So what I'm looking for in terms of my criteria, as I said, in about 20 years people sort of look back on and they're like, oh, I remember that guy. Not a world-class player at all, not a hero or a legend at a club. A player who is a bit of a moments player, had their moments, had maybe a good couple seasons, been around in the Premier League for a decent time, or at least if they haven't been in the Prem, they've had like some, incredible moments in the Prem. Ideally, they would have as well played for either one club for a really long time or played for lots of clubs across the Premier League, been a bit of a journeyman. And somebody who's maybe a bit of a throwback as a player. Naturally as well, there is a bit of a criteria here. If you're pure Barclays, is pretty much certain. I mean, it's not really a rule, but I'm pretty much enforced it that if you've won a Premier League, you can't really be considered pure Barclays, because most people that win a Premier League title are not like some bums. They're most likely world-class players, at least at some point in their career, so bear that in mind. Anyways, let's begin. Now we'll begin with goalkeepers. Goalkeepers, I'll say, is actually one of the hardest positions to pick here. There really wasn't, when I was looking at players right now who could be considered pure Barclays players, not really any goalkeepers stand out to me. So this one, it might be a bit of an unpopular pick, but bear with me here. It's Jordan Pickford. To be a pure Barclays player. Now, here's the thing. I think that Pickford can be very, very annoying to watch, with his constant whining, but I think that's kind of what makes him pure Barclays. I'm kind of just imagining in like a like compilation of this era's football in 20 years, somebody making a compilation and seeing Jordan Pickford just absolutely losing his head at his defenders and then conceding a howler straight after. Like, it's just absolutely hilarious, isn't it? And it's he does as well sometimes pull off some incredible saves. But yeah, I think the constant whining and his antics with some of the fans as well, especially when he plays Newcastle, etc., I think is what makes him kind of pure Barclays. But he's probably one of the weakest ones in this team. I was really struggling with goalkeepers partner in crime back in the day, Leighton Baines, is definitely a pure Barclays player, you know, with his free kicks, etc. And I think Seamus Coleman can, you know, maybe he was slightly just out of that era, so isn't considered pure Barclays. But I think he's somebody who fits the criteria. You know, he's been at Everton for like 20 years, still going strong. Him and Baines at fullback, you know, especially under Moyes, oh my word, these guys were devastating. They were absolutely devastating back in the day. Seamus Coleman, used to be a really, really solid right back. And yeah, I think his longevity in the game at Everton, I think he's somebody as well who fits the criteria very well in terms of in 20 years' time, no kid is going to be like, oh my god, Seamus Coleman, what a player. But I think all of us watching are going to be like, if we saw a picture of him, like, oh my god, I remember Seamus Coleman. You know, that sort of vibe. Coleman ticks that box completely. So he's in there. Okay, centre backs. So the first player we have is Craig Dawson. Definitely a pure Barclays player. I mean, he's one of the biggest journeymen in the modern day. He's played for Wolves in the Prem. He's played for West Brom when they were in the Prem. He's played for Watford when they were in the Prem. He played for West Ham when they were in the Prem. I mean, this guy's been passed around in the Prem, and you know he's a pretty solid centre back as well. He's a pretty solid centre back. You know, he's had a decent career in the Prem, been in the Prem a very, very long time, played at many, many clubs. Again, he's not some memorable figure who people are going to be talking about in 20 years. In fact, probably as soon as he retires, everybody's going to forget his name. But then when you see a picture of him, you go, oh my days, Craig Dawson. Like, yeah, just the ultimate journeyman. I think that embodies the pure Barclays aspect. Now, next to him is somebody who maybe still has a little bit of work to do, but I think it's a bit of a rogue shout. But I'm going actually for Fabian Schär. For me, I think he's actually pure Barclays. I think simply because it's sort of like Pickford. I can imagine him being in a compilation where he's just scored like a bunch of screamers, because Fabian Schär, I think that's what people are going to remember him for. He scored some bangers. He has scored some bangers in a Newcastle shirt in the Premier League from centre back. I mean, he's already scored a banger this season from centre back. He takes penalties as well sometimes for Newcastle. So I think, you know, again, in 20 years' time, people are going to look back and be like, damn, this centre back was mad. I mean, he's just banging in goals from outside the box. Like, what on earth? And then, you know, again, in 20 years' time, everybody looking at this video is, when they see Fabian Schär, they're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember this guy, you know, he used to score some bangers back in the day. So yeah, I think Fabian Schär, just for those absolute screamers he scored with Newcastle, he's had a couple. I think it's pure Barclays just for that. But let's move on to left back. Left back is actually another Newcastle player, and that is Dan Burn. Dan Burn, 6'6" giant. That is pure Barclays right there. 6'6" left back / centre back. Played for multiple clubs in the Prem. Played for Brighton. Played for Newcastle in the Premier League. Yeah, I think just because of his size, again, in 20 years' time, when we see a picture of Dan Burn, we're all going to be like, oh my god, yeah, I remember that guy. He was huge. He was massive. An absolute unit. So lanky, so tall. And we also might remember, you know, his like Orange Justice dance. I remember that, and it was just absolutely jokes. But yeah, I think Dan Burn, simply because of how big he is a pure Barclays player. Into the midfield. So our first midfielder is a really, really good pick, I think, as James Ward-Prowse. James Ward-Prowse, I think, is definitely a pure Barclays player. He is kind of the embodiment of it. I mean, this guy is a pretty bang average midfielder. You Ward-Prowse never won any trophies or major trophies in his career. You know, played a couple times for England, but that was about it. So had a fairly, average Premier League career. But then this guy, again, in 20 years' time, kids who never saw Ward-Prowse play, they'll look up like the most free kicks scored in the Premier League on like a trivia question and see this guy's name there and be like, who the hell is this guy? James Ward-Prowse, like who is that? And then they'll look him up and they'll see this guy just absolutely banging in the free kicks from left, right, centre for Southampton, for West Ham, maybe for Nottingham Forest as well. Yeah, I mean, just for the free kicks alone, right? James Ward-Prowse is pure Barclays. Everybody watching this video is not going to remember James Ward-Prowse in like 30 years. But when somebody mentions, oh, who are the best free kick takers in the Prem, you can be like, James Ward-Prowse. Remember that guy? He was pure Barclays. So Ward-Prowse is in for me. Ward-Prowse is in. Next to him, next in the midfield, we have Super John McGinn. Super John McGinn. For me, I just think he gives me like an old school vibe about him. Yeah, he gives me an old school vibe. I think the sort of heart, the passion, the desire, that's all about McGinn's game, isn't it? Don't get me wrong, he's got some good abilities as well. He's a good footballer. But I think when people think about John McGinn, they think hard work, getting stuck in, running around like crazy. He plays, sometimes a 4-4-2 at left mid, proper old school workhorse. Again, maybe if like Villa win, like a European trophy or something, people will remember him. But in 20 years, no one's really gonna remember John McGinn too much, are they? But when someone mentions, you're like, oh my god, that guy was like a dog. He would run around crazy. He was a solid Premier League player, never world class or anything, but a really solid player at Aston Villa. So, yeah. Next up, to complete the midfield, we have another Newcastle player. Newcastle actually have quite a few. You can qualify it, and it's Joel Linton. Again, kind of similar to McGinn. I think his play style is extremely pure Barclays. He is a dog. He is a workhorse. He will run up and down, get stuck into tackles. He'll dribble like crazy. And I think if you've seen a highlight reel of Joel Linton, he looks like a mad midfielder. Like, you can get a probably really good highlight reel of him. But I think what especially makes him pure Barclays is the fact that he transitioned from a striker into a centre mid. Like, that's crazy. That's mad. I think that's kind of what people are going to remember about him. That this guy absolutely stunk it up as a striker, did absolutely nothing, and then all of a sudden goes to centre mid, and this guy's just an absolute dog, and he's a pace and power merchant, just going up and down the pitch like crazy. So yeah, Joel Linton for me is a pure Barclays player. Into the front three now. The front three, so at left wing, I was kind of struggling for a left wing, but I've gone for Dwight McNeil. I do believe is pure Barclays. Again, a sort of old school type of winger, isn't he? I'm pretty sure, he's left-footed, right? Yeah, he's left-footed, plays on the left wing. He's like 6 foot on the wing, doesn't really have any pace, but this guy, again, if you see a highlight reel of McNeil, I'll tell you what, McNeil has scored some absolute bangers in his day. He has scored some absolute bangers for Everton and for Burnley. He's played under Burnley, that Sean Dyche team. I think, that alone is going to help make him pure Barclays, because people are going to look back at that Sean Dyche Burnley team, but oh, that was pure Barclays, and then they'll see like McNeil banging in a goal for them. I'll be like, damn. And then Sean Dyche's Everton as well would do the same thing, and McNeil, same thing, banging in the goals for them. And that sort of old school winger, they'll be like, what, this guy's like 6 foot playing out wide, has no pace, and then all of a sudden just bangs in these goals like crazy. So yeah, McNeil is is a pure Barclays player. Right wing for me is a guaranteed, probably the biggest pure Barclays out of all of them. It's a tapping, and that is his man here. Let me guess, oh god. Adama Traore for me is a guaranteed pure Barclays player. In 20 years' time, people who did not see Adama play are gonna have no idea who Adama is. Gonna think, who is this like rugby player? Is he even a footballer? But then all of us watching, when we hear the name Adama, we're gonna be like, oh my god, I remember this guy. This guy was the fastest footballer I've seen. This guy was literally built like this guy's strength was absolutely insane. He was a literal rugby player running down the wing, like the fastest player I've seen, the strongest player I've seen. But equally, none of us in 20 years are just gonna, when we think of right wings, we're gonna think of Adama Traore, are we? So Adama Traore is the epitome of a pure Barclays player, in my opinion. In a compilation video, people are gonna look at him like, what the hell? This guy is absolutely unbelievable, like absolutely unreal. This guy looks huge, etc. So yeah, I think Adama Traore is definitely a pure Barclays player. And up top, we have Danny Welbeck. Now, I could be cheating it. I do think Danny Welbeck might have a Premier League title. He might have won it when he was at United, but it wasn't like he was a important player. Danny Welbeck's never been like a world-class player in his career, but I think he's a player who has been around a lot in the Premier League. He's had a really long career in the Premier League. Played for Arsenal, played for Man United, played for Brighton, and for me, it's sort of the goal catalogue. He has some really good goal catalogues, and he's also scored some really clutch goals. For example, that Arsenal season where Leicester won the league, that goal versus Leicester, that's seen as like such a clutch goal. Even though Arsenal didn't win the league, I think in 20 years' time, people are going to look back at that like, oh wow, who was this guy who scored this goal? Like Danny Welbeck. And then, Danny Welbeck, as I said, he has a really good goals catalogue. He's played in the Prem for so long. Played for multiple clubs, pulled out for all three clubs pretty much. Had some really good moments, but never was really, like a world-class player or anything, but had some really good moments, scored against some big teams, always scored against Man United, for Brighton as well. So I think Danny Welbeck is definitely a pure Barclays player. Right, let's go on to the bench then quickly. So I'm going to do these together, but we have the partnership. I mentioned them before. Sean Dyche's Burnley is definitely a pure Barclays team, and the centre-back pairing of Tarkowski and Ben-Mee is easily pure Barclays. I mean, yeah, just absolute no-nonsense defenders, heading balls out like it was nothing, clearing balls, 4-4-2. These guys were integral to that side, and yeah, definitely for that reason going to be considered pure Barclays. No one in 20 years is going to remember them, but then when you mention Burnley Sean Dyche team, we're all going to be like, oh yeah, Ben-Mee, Tarkowski at the back, wow, what units they were. Okay, alright, so next up we have another centre back. We have Rob Holding. Yeah, again, a very not memorable player at all, but he's been around in the Prem for a lot with Arsenal, Crystal Palace as well. I think really the thing that's gonna make him a pure Barclays player is for me just one moment that actually involves Adama. When that moment in COVID when he's like, oh, he's built like a brick. How's it gone down like that? For me, that was just such a good moment, and I think everyone, in like 10 years, mention Rob Holding, all of us are gonna be like, oh my god, yeah, remember when he said that about Adama? And yeah, just sort of all laugh about that and be like, oh, Rob Holding, what a what a bang average player, to be honest. Next up, we have another bang average player, and that is Adam Smith. Adam Smith for me is pure Barclays. I mean, just a really, really, really mid fullback. I don't think I've ever seen Adam Smith score a goal in the Premier League. I'm not sure I've seen him get an assist. I'm not really sure I've seen him get absolutely skinned. You know, he's just the epitome of mid. I'm not gonna lie. But he's been around at the Prem for quite a long time. He's been at Bournemouth like forever, it seems. So, yeah, again, one of those players, 20 years time, you're gonna see, and if someone says Adam Smith, you're gonna be like, oh, what, that guy who played at Bournemouth for like 10,000 years and was so average. So yeah, I think he's pure Barclays for that reason. The next one I have is sort of borderline. He probably won't end up being pure Barclays, but I think right now he's sort of on track, and that's Ben White. Now you gotta hear me out on this one. So Ben White, I mean, you can argue is kind of world class as a right back. You can make that argument, and right now he doesn't have a Prem title though, and I think, you know, people, you know, sort of borderline if he's world class. He could well win a Prem title, be integral to it, and this conversation, he'll be out of this. However, I'm just assuming that, you know, let's say football ends right now, or Ben White's career ends right now. For me, he's pure Barclays because he's somebody who is, I think, just for the, you know, pure like his tactics, his antics, you know, undoing Vicario's gloves, the diving, all of that sort of stuff. I think what sort of makes him pure Barclays, kind of similar to Pickford in a way. So yeah, I think I can definitely see him sort of people looking back at him, and again, if you know his career was to end now in 20 years, people aren't really gonna be like, oh, Ben White, you know, what a player he was. People will sort of be like, yeah, you know what, actually he was a pretty good player, and he would do some, you know, pretty weird stuff and try wind up getting in the heads of opponents, etc. Next up, we have Ross Barkley. Ross Barkley, yeah, definitely pure Barclays for me. I think that purely for the moments, this guy definitely has a really, really good compilation video. He has a really good compilation highlights reel. Barkley's had some bangers in the Prem. You know, his Barkley at Everton. Oh my God, Barkley at Everton was so good as well. He was so good. You know, at one point he looked like he was going to be a star. Even at Chelsea again, didn't work out, but had some really good moments here and there, and him against Liverpool balling out. Again for Luton as well, balled out. So was never like a world class player or anything, but I think again in 20 years time, people who never saw him play are gonna have no idea who this guy is. Whereas if someone mentions Ross Barkley to us, we're gonna be like, oh my God, yeah, that guy, you know, he had some moments, he had some really, really good moments. And if they look up a compilation of him, they're like, damn, this guy was pretty good, you know, this guy was pretty decent. So yeah, Barclays, pure Barclays. nice little sort of rhyme there. Next up, we have a striker, and we have Miguel Antonio. Yeah, I mean, Antonio for me is pure Barclays. I think that his playing style is very sort of pure Barclays, a proper sort of old school number 9 where holds up the ball super physical, likes to run in behind. He has some really, really good goals, and you know, he has some games where he's absolutely bullied defenders. Again, decent little highlight reel. Also some of his celebrations are class, you know. I can remember a couple of them being really good. I can imagine sort of like in a compilation him absolutely bullying a defender and then, you know, going into one of his celebrations or something like that. Yeah, I think Antonio definitely for me is pure Barclays. Next up we have another striker, another actual West Ham striker, and it's Danny Ings. Yeah, Danny Ings, I think purely for that year with Southampton, is pure Barclays. Danny Ings was never a world-class player or anything. At one point it did look like he was going to become a really good player, but of course it didn't really work out at Liverpool, was really good at Burnley, then went to Southampton, and that's where he becomes pure Barclays. I think people are going to remember that year with Danny Ings. You know, I think if I say the word Danny Ings to you right now, what do you think of? A lot of you probably think of, you know, that year with Southampton where he was, what, like second top goal scorer in the Premier League that year. Absolutely insane. But you probably don't really think of too much else, or maybe you think of him at West Ham, maybe you think of him at Burnley, Liverpool, Villa. He's been around the block, he's been in the Prem. And yeah, as I said, I think if Danny Ings, once he retires, names get mentioned, you'll be like, oh yeah, he had that really mad season for Southampton, didn't he? So I think he's pure Barclays. Okay, and finally, okay, it didn't load for a sec, but there we go. Okay, it's a bit laggy. I'll wait for it. Right, sorry, it took very long to load, so I had to reload it. But the final player, there we go, is, where is he? Chris Wood. Again, think about that Burnley side. With Sean Dyche, and you'll think of Tarkowski, you think of Bentley, you might think of McNeil, but you'll definitely also think of Ashley Barnes and Chris Wood up the top together. The two target forwards, 4-4-2, lumping it up there, flick-ons for headers, bullying defenders. And you also might think of Chris Wood when you think of Nottingham Forest and the Prem with Nuno. You know, he's doing really well right now. And yeah, I think at Nottingham Forest right now he's doing some really good things to help add to his status and secure himself as a pure Barclays player, but I think he already is with that Burnley squad. Oh yeah, and I guess the manager, I've spoken about him so much, but he's pure Barclays. It's got to be Sean Dyche. Sean Dyche, Premier League, pure Barclays, get in there, mate. So there we go, that is a pure Barclays team. Let's run through it. We got Ingold, Jordan Pickford, right back James Coleman, centre backs Craig Dawson, Fabian Schär, left back Dan Burn, midfielder Joel Linton, Ward-Prowse, McGinn, front three of Adama Traore, Danny Welbeck and Dwight McNeil. The bench we have Ben Mee, James Tarkowski, Rob Holding, Adam Smith, Ben White, Ross Barkley, Miguel Antonio, Danny Ings and Chris Wood. So, I guess all of these players, you guys can answer if I've selected a pure Barclays side by answering these questions. Are any of these players, will you remember any of these players in 20 years? Be honest. Probably not, unless somebody mentions their names. Are any of these world-class or legendary players? Or, you know, Premier League winners? No. Are some of these players players who had some really good moments, some really good games, had really good seasons at points? Yes. Have these players some of them been around in the Prem for a long time, played for lots of different clubs, or played at a club for a very long time, or played in a memorable club or a memorable team? Yes. So, for that reason, I think I picked a pure Barclays side, but who have I missed out? Let me know, I'm sure there are some who I've missed. And if you have enjoyed this video, please leave a like, consider subscribing. I'll see you in another video. Peace.